this week we want to do sort of a deep dive into a topic that everybody's talking about, and that is the financial stability of Lebanon, the stability of the lira peg to the dollar. There's a lot of talk right now. Is the economy stable? Is the state financial system stable? And the financial system in general, is that stable? Is the currency peg going to last, or is there going to be some sort of devaluation? Every couple of days, it seems, the governor of the central bank, Riyad Saleh, comes out and says there is nothing to worry about. Everything is fine. The lira is sound. The currency peg is sound. Don't worry. So I think it's important for us to sort of like drill down. And then this is why we have Dan Azzi on the show this week, because Dan has a way of explaining things that is very, just cuts right to the heart of it. And so we're going to try to just basically go through why is everybody talking about this and why is this important?
With the least amount of financial jargon that we can possibly use.
Exactly. So, I mean, in any discussion like this needs to start out with, well, what is the Lebanese economy based on? How do we make our money? What kinds of activities are actually productive in Lebanon?
Well, I think calling the Lebanese economy in its present state an economy is a bit of a stretch. I mean, an economy is something that has manufacturing, it has tourism, it has knowledge economy, and so on. I think our economy, especially for the last decade or so, is really based on remittances into the country of various kinds that got plowed into stuff like real estate and stuff like lending the government. And of course, if the government gets money from an easy source, what are they going to do? They're going to spend it and then some. So from that perspective, this has been how our economy has functioned. And of course, what do we do with the money that we make? We import stuff. We don't make stuff in the country. So looking around this room, I see your shoes, glasses, the mattress, the laptop. Everything is made overseas, and we have to pay dollars for that. Except Ben's shirt, that looks like it was made here in Burj Hammoud.
I went with something colorful today.
Local craft. So if I understand it well, the big problem that we have is what is called current accounts deficit, which is that we have more money leaving the country than entering it. We're talking about exports and imports, but also just money going in and out. And this has been a problem since 2011. The current accounts deficit has been increasing. There seems to be no point where this is changing, and this is what's making everyone very worried. For Lebanese people, it's self-evident that the dollar is equal to 1,500 Lebanese pounds. But I think it's important to kind of explain why this happened in the first place and why it made sense when it did.
Yeah, let's back up a bit and just talk about the peg, what it is and how it's maintained and everything. The peg came in back in the 90s after a period during the Civil War and right after the Civil War of massive inflation. $1 used to buy you something like 3 lira, right?
Yeah.
And today, $1 will buy you like 1,500 lira. Well, back in the early 90s, that number spiked way, way up to 2,700, something like that, right?
2,800 in 1992.
And so at that point, the policymakers decided, first off, bring that number back down, and then to peg it at around 1,500 to the dollar. And that's been in place since 97, 98. Back then, that was actually a good thing, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, in the early 90s, when PEG was put in place, this was crucial to make sure that confidence is restored in the local currency. This is not something new. Argentina did the same thing the first time around, the second time around, and they'll probably do it again. Venezuela will probably do it eventually when they get out of their crisis. So it's necessary to do it for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. The problem is that we've had it for 20 years. Now, there are some benefits that we had over the first, say, 15 years, which can be summarized in the fact that the average Lebanese Yusuf, average Joe, has had a standard of living much higher than his productivity would have entailed had the currency been floating.
And also, as far as I know, this has had positive effects on like stability and like confidence in the economy, in terms of people having the trauma of the civil war and the currency devaluating are now more confident that things will remain the same. So for investments and for deposits coming in, because as you said, the Lebanese economy is highly dependent on money coming in, remittances, and also deposits in banks for high interest rates. But what have been the negative effects of it in terms of maybe crowding out private investment or other things that you might think would be the negative side of this policy?
I mean, I think for whatever reason, there's a misconception in the country that the peg in and of itself is a goal. You know, if the peg is there, then we're doing good. If the peg is not there, then we're doing bad. And this is back to the US dollar. I mean, in my mind, the US dollar itself is pegged to the US dollar at 1-to-1. I'm being facetious here. Since 1776. If that were a policy in and of itself, then you don't need a Federal Reserve, an American central bank.
Yeah.
Now, you've got to look at what are we trying to achieve. In an economy, what you want is low inflation, which is defined in respectable countries as 2% or lower. And you want low unemployment, which is defined as something between 5 to 10%. On both those counts, especially unemployment, we're doing very, very badly.
The Lebanese Politics Podcast is brought to you by myself, Nizar Hassan, Benjamin Red, produced behind the scenes by Susan Wilson, and the music is by Omar El Fil.